So the human soul, you could say, has language in it. From working with young people, they will say the most amazing things. And they didn't expect to say it either. And no one in their family thought they would say it either. So that tells me it's already in them. So people come into the world with words inscribed on the walls of their soul. And when a person can get next to the language already in them, there's a kind of a sense of wholeness and a sense of authentic quality and also a sense of, what would you call that? Confidence that isn't there, you know, just with the stuff that people are given to deal with. So the natural language of humans is poetry. The common language that people speak now is not as natural as the poetry inside people. You have to learn how to talk the way people talk in the daily world. You know, people pass each other and say, "Hi, how are you?" And the person says, "Fine." Well, they're not fine. You know, you follow them down the road, they weren't fine at all. You know, they couldn't pay their mortgage. They just the love affair fell apart. They're not fine. You know, that's just the way people kind of pass each other by. Inside, people are carrying the language of poetry. People are naturally poetic. The soul is poetic. So the easiest way to get to young people is to talk poetry and have rhythm. I mean, they get it. For instance, I was with a room full, maybe 45 gang kids, pretty rough kids, and they didn't want to be there. They were brought into the situation by someone, and they didn't really want to be there. And I could feel that. And I didn't want to get into I didn't want to waste my time, but I also didn't want them to have another experience that was a bad experience. So I just said something about, so on this road to death, how you guys doing? And someone said, "What do you mean, road to death?" And I said, "Well, we're all going to die." "Why are you bringing that up?" I said, "Well, what were you thinking about last night?" You know, so he said, "Well, I was thinking about death." I said, "Yeah, that's what I'm saying." I said, "You know, so far no one's gotten out of this alive. We're all going to die. It's a question of when." I said, "But there's another question too." "Yeah, what?" "Well, the other question is, will you know who you are when you die? Or will death have to tell you?" "Well, how do you know who you are?" And I said, "Well, that in order to know who you are, you first have to live. And you have to live the life you came to live." "Well, how do you know what life you came?" You know, next thing, you know, all the problems, the initial problems were gone. Now we're talking about life and death. Well, what is poetry? Poetry is about life, love, and death. All themes fall under those three things. So invite them in to the conversation about life, love, and death, and young people will show up. So anyway, that's how I call all of that's poetic to me, the themes as well as the language. And so actually it's interesting because we were going to be together for a few days, this group, and so we wound up making death masks. And they loved that. They just loved it. And years later, I'd see them, and I still have that mask. I got that mask on my wall. Do you remember my mask? My mask had, you know? And so now, there's an old saying, all philosophy begins with death. So I also tell those kids, so after about an hour of talking, I'll say, so now that we're all poets and philosophers, why? Because we're speaking in a surprising way, and we're talking about death, therefore we're philosophers. You know, now we're in a different place. What are we going to do? We're not gangbangers right now. You know, we're not even Americans right now. We're poets and philosophers. So where are we going to go? What do we have to really do? You know, that kind of thing. So the other thing is, in initiation rites, which were done traditionally with girls and boys everywhere in the world until modern times, death was introduced to young people. One of the old ideas is that people who don't know death don't know much about life. When a person realizes they're going to die, you start to say, wow, this might be important what I do today. Death makes life more important. But modern cultures don't want to address death. But young people do want to address death. You know, I'll talk to a large group of young people. How many have thought about suicide? All the hands go up. I said, guess what? Everybody thinks about suicide. And everybody thinks about suicide when they're young. Why? We don't know. You know, then now you're in a new discussion. You know, why would people think about suicide? You know, or the other side of the coin. I'll be giving a talk or whatever it is, and one or two young people will wait till the end and wait till everybody's gone, and then come up and say, well, you know, you mentioned death. Yeah. Well, you know, I was thinking about suicide. And I said, what do you mean thinking about it? Have you decided how you're going to do it? Well, yeah. Okay, how are you going to do it? Oh, you want me to tell you? I said, yeah, you brought it up. I want to hear. So he said, well, you know, I thought I'd jump off a bridge. I said, why? You know, and then go into the whole thing. And so there's a case where you have to get into specifically why would a young person plan their death. And then what I usually say to them is, listen, you're not supposed to die, but part of you has to die, and you've got it mixed up. You're old enough now that part of you needs to die so you can have a big life, and you think all of you needs to die. So what we have to do now is figure out which part of you needs to die, and we'll throw that off the bridge, and then you're going to cross the bridge and keep going. And sometimes that's all you have to do for them to go, oh, I get it, you know, and so on. So, and cultures used to do that. Invite the kids into life by giving them the big themes of life and death. And the big themes of life and death are the themes of mythology. So myth, to me, is essential for young people just to find out who they are and what this world's about.